number because it came out last year. Okay, so Geshe, the Buddhist monk in the 19th year, right?
Yes.
The 19th year of his studies at Serage, and he's taken that exam and become a Geshe, like you could say, a doctor of divinity in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of the Gelugpa school, Yellow Hat school. And he's been studying the classical Indian Buddhist tradition all these years in the Tibetan language, which is pretty amazing. And also studying the Tibetan commentaries, because the Tibetans kept this tradition alive when it had all but died out in India. He was ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2001. And the question, what makes the most happy and meaningful life, compelled him to major in philosophy at Kenyon College, gradually led him to study meditation, philosophy, and psychology with teachers among the exiled Tibetan communities in India and Nepal from 1999 onwards until the present. For the past 16 years, he has worked to make basic Buddhist teachings accessible to various audiences in India and the United States through lectures, essays, meditation instruction, and now this wonderful book. So Geshe, thank you very, very much for again coming to Tushita, and we hope it won't be the last time. So we'd like you to shed some light on how to work with attachment and anger.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kabir. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So we have two sessions today. This one now for about an hour and a half, and then one in the afternoon from 2:30 to 4 or so, another hour and a half. So the first session, we'll do on attachment, working with attachment, and the second session on anger, working with anger. So let's start with generating a positive motivation. Spend some time, generate a positive motivation for the session. So to do that, let's meditate a little bit. And then, we can recite, again, like last time on Friday. On Friday's session, recite Buddha's name, Shakyamuni Buddha's name mantra as a way of going for refuge. So first, get comfortable in your meditation posture. And focus your mind inwards on an object of placement meditation, either your breath or the nature of the mind, conventional or ultimate nature of the mind. For just a minute or so, try to generate some focused awareness. And then if you like, visualize yourself surrounded by sentient beings. So when we do this, we usually visualize sentient beings in three groups: friends, strangers, and antagonists. So we usually begin with our mother and father to our right, to our left and right, actually. So you can imagine your mother of this life seated at your left, and all your female friends and family to your left and behind you. And then your father of this life seated at your immediate right, and all your male friends and family to your right and behind you. And then those whom you're most prone to become irritated or angry with, imagine seated directly in front of you, about 2 or 3 meters distant, facing towards you. And then all the other sentient beings of the 6 realms, imagine in human form, seated all around you, as vast as space, and have a sense of your interconnectedness with them, and how oneself and all other sentient beings are the same in wishing to be free from suffering and have lasting, stable well-being and happiness. So then to generate a motivation, oh, maybe since it's Sunday morning, we have time. We can just briefly reflect on the entire graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. So beginning with how we're fortunate in this life to have met qualified gurus, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. How fortunate it is to be born at a time when His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Legtsok, and other qualified gurus that we've met have appeared. It's like all the Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha and all the other Buddhas appearing in human form in a way that we can relate to and giving precious advice. So think how fortunate that is, and how fortunate we are to not only have met these gurus, but to have taken rebirth. I mean, part of that is we've taken rebirth in a human form. So in countless past lives, usually we take rebirth in other forms as animals, hell beings, hungry ghosts, and sometimes in the upper realms. But this rebirth, we take in rebirth as a human, and a human being with intelligence, and someone who has some karma to have connection with the Buddhist teachings and have some interest and faith in spiritual teachings in general, especially the Buddhist teachings, and the ability to practice, to investigate our own minds and make decisions about how we want to live, how we don't want to live. But this situation of having taken rebirth as a human, it won't last long, because death is certain to happen. And at that time, we'll be totally separated from this life. The time of death is uncertain. It could happen at any time. It's totally unpredictable when our death will come. And at the time of death, only positive qualities of the mind, dharma, will be of benefit. All of our possessions, our friends and family, even this body, it won't be able to help us as we transition to a future life. And then after death, because we've created many virtuous, non-virtuous actions in the past, so we all have the karma to take rebirth in very suffering circumstances in the lower realms. So recognizing the potential suffering of the hell beings, hungry ghost animals, and unfortunate states as a human, others. Then if one has refuge, then one naturally turns to for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But the main way the Buddha protects us from suffering is to teach us the law of karma, cause and effect. How our own suffering and happy and suffering experiences arise due to our own actions, our own virtuous and non-virtuous actions. So thinking about the law of cause and effect, then we generate a mind of confidence or refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But then seeing that by abandoning non-virtuous actions and engaging in virtuous actions only ensures us rebirth in samsara, in a wholesome state, a fortunate state in samsara. But as long as we're in samsara, then we're under the control of karma and afflictive emotions, and we'll never really be free from suffering. So therefore, identifying the root of samsara is ignorance grasping at a self existing from its own side, and seeing that the only way to eliminate that root of samsara, the ignorance which is the root of samsara, is to engage in the three higher trainings of higher ethical conduct, higher concentration, and the training in higher wisdom. And the higher training in wisdom. Wisdom realizing selflessness. But even if we perfectly train in the three higher trainings, then the most we can achieve is freedom from samsara for ourselves alone. So recognizing the countless other sentient beings whom we visualized around us, and in dependence upon whom are every pleasant experience, every form of well-being and happiness, from mundane pleasures up to a state of full enlightenment, arises in dependence upon sentient beings. So recognizing their kindness to us in this life and countless past lives, their kindness to us in future lives, how they're the object of all the Buddha's loving kindness and compassion, the main object of all the enlightened beings, selfless concern. So then we recognize how important it is to use our lives to work for the welfare of others, and then seeing what's the best possible way we can use our lives to work for the welfare of others, not only this life but future lives, is to abandon every harmful behavior and every fault of our actions of body, speech, and especially of our mind. Abandon every obscuration of mind, and to perfect every positive quality, especially loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, up to omniscience, right? So if we can have the wisdom which knows perfectly how to interact with each and every sentient being, so that we're the most that interaction is the most possibly beneficial to them. So in short, if possible, try to generate the bodhicitta motivation for the session, thinking, in order to be of the greatest possible benefit for all sentient beings, I myself will achieve the state of full enlightenment, or whatever authentic kind of positive intention for engaging in this session arises in your mind. Try to stabilize, clarify, and stabilize them. So then, if you like, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space before you, or any refuge field. And remember, all the objects of refuge are one nature with one's own gurus, and with all the Buddhas of the 3 times and 10 directions. And then again, remember one's own recognition of the possibility of future suffering and the wish to be free from that, and the ability of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha to protect one from suffering, and in that way entrust yourself to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Then we can recite Buddha's name mantra, the way of going for the future. So briefly imagine white light rays radiate out from Buddha's holy body, purifying you and every other sentient being of every form of suffering and the cause of suffering, karma, and afflictive emotions. And purifying the environment as well. And then golden light rays radiate out from Buddha's holy body, blessing you and all sentient beings to have every happiness and good fortune and all the realizations of the stages of the path to enlightenment up to the state of full enlightenment. And also blessing the environment to be completely filled with perfect conditions for practicing that path, conducive conditions for practicing the path. And then imagine an emanation of Buddha dissolves into you, and the same for every other sentient being seated around you. You and all sentient beings become one entity with Shakyamuni Buddha, or achieve the state of full enlightenment of Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, so we can stop preliminary motivation there. Yeah, so today the session, working with attachment. So, well, working with attachment is very much an internal process, right? So I'll describe something, say a few things about attachment, but we'll also meditate as we go along at kind of each step of the way. We'll try to meditate and sort of get a sense of how we can work with our own attachment. So primary in our meditation will be, first of all, we need to identify what attachment is. So I'll give some description, a definition, some description, and then we'll meditate to identify in our own experience what's, some instance of attachment we have, what kind of, maybe we're attached to a person or food or being treated in a particular way, or I don't know, a place or something. So identify something oneself is, we'll try to identify something that each of us, independently is attached to, and see if our experience of attachment fits the definition. What are the different characteristics of attachment? And then, to work with attachment means to reduce attachment, right? And work towards eliminating attachment. So in order to sincerely want to do that, we have to see the faults. Why is it a problem? Because attachment is one of the most difficult afflictive emotions to work with, because it feels pleasant when it arises, right? It feels like it's something enjoyable. And there isn't, there are enjoyable aspects of it, but at a more subtle level, it disturbs the mind and leads us into disappointment. So we have to put a little effort into working to see, well, what are the faults of attachment? What are the kind of problems it leads me into? And why, why should I want to reduce it? So we'll look at some of the faults of attachment. And then, so again, we'll check our own experience of attachment and see if, we actually do experience faults of attachment arising in our own experience. And then we'll look at some different ways, some different antidotes to attachment. So what are different ways of thinking to try to reduce and gradually eliminate attachment? And then maybe we'll see how the time goes, but maybe towards the end, if we have time, we'll try to imagine a kind of life without attachment. What would that be like? Which is important to do, because oftentimes I think, oftentimes when we talk about, reducing attachment or anger or other afflictive emotions, we forget about, we have a sense that, okay, we can get rid of this thing, but then what am I left with? We can feel like then we're left with just an empty life that is totally flavorless. It's like, I don't know, like if we were to think, all the different, flavors in food, if we were to take those, okay, salt is not good for you because it's caused you to have high blood pressure, and that, caused you to have heart problems and, diabetes. And so we have to take out the salt. And then sugar is not good for you because, it causes, causes your, glycemic index to spike up, and then ruins your kidneys or something, and causes you to have diabetes. So we have to get rid of the sugar. So then already a lot of the flavor is gone. And I don't know, maybe too much spice is not good for you because it ruins your stomach and your, digestion and So then you end up with just a totally bland food, which isn't very appealing, right? unless you think about the real benefits. So we can have the sense that, okay, if we get rid of anger, get rid of jealousy, get rid of pride, get rid of attachment, then we're just left with a totally bland and tasteless life. But that's not the case, no. So it's important to think rather about how much, how enjoyable and actually more rich our experience of life can be without attachment, and try to imagine, get a sense of what that would be like. So then, in the end, the idea is that when you see the positive alternatives to attachment, then the objects of attachment become like grass for a tiger. So like when a tiger looks around, they're interested in getting a prey, the meat. The grass they have no interest in. So gradually it should be like all the
Unless they're sick.
I don't know, do tigers eat grass to vomit, you mean? When they're sick to their stomach, they eat grass? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, but like beings who have generated the meditative concentration of the form and formless realms, of the upper realms, then for them the pleasures of the desire realm are like totally uninteresting, unappealing. So yeah, you can try to imagine a mind like that. Anyway, okay, so first of all, attachment is an afflictive emotion, right? So this whole class of afflictive emotions, what are afflictive emotions in general? They are states of mind that when they arise in our continuum, in our experience, when they arise, their nature is disturbing, right? They disturb the peace of the mind. I keep hearing some kind of like echo from over there. I think yours, yeah.
Okay.
I think you have the. I think you have. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So an afflictive emotion is a state of mind that when it arises, it disturbs the peace of the mind. So if we imagine, our mind is like water, right? Our mind is like a lake or a body of water. So when there's no wind and there's no earthquakes, or I don't know, people throwing rocks into it or something, then the water, what happens? It becomes naturally very calm, and the surface of the water becomes very smooth and reflective, right? And if the water doesn't have mud or murkiness in it because it's been calm for a long time, then any sediment or mud or clay in the water, it settles down and it becomes very clear and lucid. So our minds are said to be like that. The nature of the mind is merely that which is clear and knowing, meaning that there's no perception or feeling or thought that's fixed in our mind. We can look in our own mind and see that different thoughts arise and pass away, different feelings, sometimes pleasant, sometimes neutral, sometimes unpleasant, arise and pass away. Feeling of safety, feeling of I don't know, fear. Different experiences arise and pass away, but there's no one kind of experience that's fixed in our awareness. And yet, but what is it that's what qualities of mind are always present is the quality of knowing, of experiencing an object, and the quality of the potential being there for new objects to appear. The fact that there's no object fixed in the face of our awareness, but rather like a mirror. And a mirror is also a good analogy for the mind, or the sky. That like in a mirror, different objects, no matter what's being reflected in the face of the mirror, that object can always move away and a different object can be reflected, right? So long as there's light. So yeah, so there's that quality of clarity, and nothing's fixed in the face of the mind, in the space of the mind, and the quality of knowing, being aware of objects. So if the mind is just not disturbed by anything, then naturally it becomes very calm and very clear and lucid. And I think there's a sense of joyfulness that goes with that. I think you can say. We can check out our own experience, but especially when the mind becomes calm and lucid and knows reality as it is, definitely there's a sense of joy that goes with knowing things as they are. So back to afflictive emotions and her states of mind that arise in our continuum, and they disturb the peace of the mind, right? So that's the nature of afflictive emotion. So within afflictive emotions, there's three root afflictive emotions: attachment, anger, and ignorance. And then there's 6 root afflictive emotions, and then you can expand to 10 because there's 5 types of wrong view and 5 types of that are not views. But here, we'll just stick with anger this morning. Attachment this morning, anger this afternoon. So within afflictive emotions, okay, how does attachment disturb the mind? So what is attachment? Okay, so first, attachment is, well, what do you think? Does attachment observe? What kind of objects does attachment observe? Can it observe? Can it observe external objects? We can divide objects into 2 types: external and internal. So do we have forms of attachment that observe external objects? Yes, like food, another person. What?
Materialistic things.
Materialistic things, yeah. Money in the bank, or I don't know, clothes or cars, yeah. House. But can we have attachment that observes internal things? Like what? Memories, we can be attached to memories, yes. Relationships, or the feelings that go with relationships, yeah. Ego, yeah, our own sense of self, our ego, our pride, a sense of our reputation, yeah. So we can have attachment to things that are external or things that are internal. But do we usually have attachment for things that appear to us as pleasing or things that appear as unpleasing? Pleasing, yeah. Usually things that we appear as desirous, as pleasant, as attractive, those things we're attached to. Things that appear as unattractive, as undesirable, as disturbing, we want to get away from. So attachment has an energy of like wanting to pull things, observing something as pleasant and wanting to draw it closer. Whereas aversion is the opposite. It observes things as being unpleasant and wants to push them away or be distanced away from them, right? So there's these 2 kind of fundamental energies of wanting to pull things away or repel things and push them. So like pull things towards us or repel things and push them away. So attachment, okay, so there we can already see a lot about attachment. It can observe objects that are external or internal. It's quite simple. So, and then when it observes the object as being pleasant, right? As having, being attractive, being pleasant, having a pleasant appearance. So now some of the more, so just observing an object and then observing it as being pleasant or beautiful, is that a problem? No, not really. There are beautiful things. I mean, we see flowers, rainbows, attractive people, attractive music. There are pleasant things in the world. Like, to say we need to reduce attachment doesn't mean we need to stop seeing anything as being beautiful or attractive or enjoyable. That would really be a bummer, right? So we can enjoy life, right? There are things that are attractive, but the thing, so here, what are the problems with attachment, right? So attachment sees something as pleasant, and then exaggerates the pleasantness of that. Exaggerates the attractiveness of the object. That's one thing. It's almost like projects more attractiveness on the object that is there. Now that one's a little difficult. It's a little difficult to see, because then it comes into the question, well, how attractive is an object? How do you distinguish between the attractiveness the object actually has and then what I exaggerate more, right? What's more, and what am I projecting onto it more than what's actually there? It's difficult to see that, right? Because how attractive something is very much relative to our own opinions, right? To our own dispositions and to our karma. But what we can see is, what's a little easier to see is that attractive, when we're attached to something, we see the object as exclusively good, exclusively attractive, and we become blind to any of the unattractive aspects of that, of the object. So, you can see that with a person is the most easiest, when you're very attracted to a person. So, yeah, so generally when we're trying to understand, define an afflictive emotion, it's good to look at a very obvious example, and then we can clearly see the different characteristics of that afflictive emotion. And then as we have we'll have some confidence understanding the main characteristics of the afflictive emotion with regard to an obvious example, then we can look at less obvious, more subtle examples. So when I think of, this aspect of attachment, when we look up here, observing an object, the object appears as attractive, and we exaggerate the attractiveness such that we don't see anything unattractive about the person. Think about like when you first fell in love in high school. That's a great example, when you're in college or whenever. When you first fall in love with someone, the person you're attracted to, it's like they glow, they radiate as if there's some kind of, like an angel or something. They're heavenly. So you see the person as very attractive, whether handsome or beautiful, and you don't see anything unattractive about the person. Even maybe children with regard to their parents, young children, when they're attached to their mother or their father, they kind of see in that way. They see, just only good things about them and don't see anything unattractive or unpleasant about them. And the same thing probably goes with food, or, if you have an obvious instance of attaching to a certain food or a certain, drugs or alcohol or reputation or something, praise. But this is one thing we'll check, right? We'll check this in our own experience in just a minute. So attachment observes an object, the object appears as pleasant and exaggerates the pleasantness of the object. And one aspect of that exaggeration is it only sees pleasant aspects of the object, and it doesn't see, the mind of attachment doesn't see anything unattractive about the object. And then a second feature is that, that the mind becomes stuck. It clings to the object, and it's difficult to pull the attention away. And when we pull the attention away, the mind comes back to the object again and again and again. So again, you can see this, in relation to a person, when you became attached to a person at some point, or with, maybe a food or a memory or something. So it's said that attachment is like oil in cloth. If you drop some, if you're eating maybe, say you're eating a piece of butter toast, right, with a lot of butter on it, and you drop some crumbs on the bread. The crumbs are difficult to, you have a napkin or a napkin in your lap. You drop some crumbs on the napkin. It's easy to just shake the napkin off. The crumbs come out. It's easy to separate the crumbs. So like other afflictive emotions like anger or jealousy are a bit more like that. They're quite easy to get rid of. But attachment is like if you drop, a bit of butter on the cloth, and then it starts to, say liquid, anyway, some butter, and it gets smeared in the cloth. So it's like oil or some kind of oil on cloth. It goes in between the fibers, and it starts to spread out, and it's very difficult to get out. So attachment in the mind, it's very difficult to separate the mind. And one reason for that is because it observes a pleasant object and clings to that object in a way that feels rewarding, right? It feels pleasant. And so it's difficult to separate out. So a second feature of attachment there is that it clings to the object and has a difficult time, not observing the object, wants to observe it, wants to possess it or experience it again and again, not be separated from it. And then a third feature, and then we'll stop. So a third feature of attachment is, and this is another way where we exaggerate the attractiveness of the object, is we have a sense that well, maybe I'll just stop at this one. So we have a sense that the pleasantness, that we perceive of the object, it comes from the side of the object. It has nothing to do with my perception, right? The object in and of itself, from its own side, is pleasant, is inherently pleasant, right? And it has the ability to give me pleasure, right? And then I guess we can add, because it's so much closely related, is that, and without that object, I'll be devoid of pleasure, right? So the object that I observe that appears as attractive, it's pleasant. It's not that I'm just perceiving it as pleasant. Like we think about food, whatever your favorite, your favorite food is, for you, it's delicious. Like some people, I don't know, like just this morning I had some hummus with a lot of garlic in it. Garlic is like something, some people really like the taste of garlic and some people really abhor the taste of garlic. So for people who really like the taste of, hummus with a lot of garlic, it looks like, oh yeah, it's got a garlic in it. It's delicious, It appears that like that food is delicious just from the side of the object. It's not that just I have, from due to my own karma, my own disposition, my own habituation, that I like garlic in there, but I project deliciousness onto something, some hummus with a lot of garlic. It looks like the deliciousness really comes from the side of the object. If that was the case, then if it was the case that the deliciousness of hummus with a lot of garlic really was, the deliciousness of it really was in the object, everybody should experience it as delicious, right? Just like if something is cold, that really, if there's water that's cold, well, that's a little bit problematic, but you can say basically everybody with a normal kind of sensibilities experiences it as cold, right? It's not that we just project coldness onto it. Anyway, there's a lot of room for debate there, but attachment perceives the object it perceives as if the pleasantness that we experience in relation to it is completely from the side of the object, independent of our own mind. Okay, so now let's pause for a moment and look at our own instance of our own attachment, which you've probably been thinking about as I've been talking, but maybe just try to focus on for a moment and try to remember some of the characteristics of the sort of definition of attachment I've been describing. That it observes an object, the object appears as pleasant. We exaggerate the pleasantness of the object in terms of being blind to any faults of the object. Now, maybe I'll just note as we go through. So first, just sit and look, try to remember clearly a very obvious form of attachment in your own experience. Some person or something, reputation or possession or memory or something you're attached to in the recent past. So first of all, think, what is the object, and how does the object appear to your mind of attachment? As pleasant, unpleasant, or how? And then second, to the mind of attachment, do any unpleasant characteristics of the object appear or not? And then third is there this aspect of clinging, of the mind clinging to the object, like not wanting to be separated from, or when we're being drawn to, attracted to the object again and again. So there being like a magnetic force attracting your attention to that object such that it's difficult to pull your mind away to think about or look at something else. Is that there? And then is there a sense that the object I perceive as attractive really is attractive from its own side, completely independent of my way of experiencing, my own unique way of experiencing it? Is it really attractive from its own side? Does it appear like that? And then finally, in the mind of attachment, does it appear like that object can give me happiness, can please me? If I get sort of the desire of my attachment, if I get the object, or I enjoy the object of my attachment as I wish, does it appear like that will give me pleasure? And if I don't have that, then I'll be bereft of happiness. It's like then I can't be satisfied without the object of attachment. Okay, so relax your attention there. So I don't know, how did you find? Did you find your experience of attachment? Does it match with that kind of description, the definition? Does it seem like an accurate description? Yeah. Okay. Do you have any questions about so far just the nature of attachment before we go on to like the faults and practicing antidotes? Yes.
Would you say that it's also based on a dualistic mind?
Oh,
A strong sense of me and other.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
It seems to underlie all of it.
No, it does. Yeah, for 100%. Yeah, attachment arises from, if there's no sense of like strong sense of self, then there's no sense of this dualism between self and other. So there's no sense that, for me to be happy, I have to have something from other, because there's no sense of like a self and other as something different.
But there's a danger in that too, right?
In
if
what?
you feel that you and the other are the same, then it's almost like thinking if I'm hungry, the other person should be hungry. That kind of confusion of boundaries.
Yeah, that can come a little bit. Yeah, that's why yeah, but that's a very, very different question. That's a very different problem. Yeah. Yes.
You have defined the attachment. There is an exaggeration, the pleasantness. Okay, so anything which is really there, we are assuming that there's a pleasantness in that. We are only exaggerating that. So my question is that, can you give me some examples where you have really enjoyed the things which are pleasant, but there has not been any exaggeration and no continuum of their memory also?
Yeah.
I can answer that.
Okay, try. Yeah, why not?
So this morning I was at Sundar Nursery and there were lots of flowers, and I enjoyed the sight of those flowers, but I am not attached to them, and that was a pleasant experience. And it's not as if I'm going to crave that I don't have those flowers with me. Is that a valid?
Yeah, I think that's close. I think it's something like that.
Temporary attachment kind of.
What?
Temporary kind of attachments.
Can probably a temporary kind of attachment. I don't know. I mean, that's the big question. How can we see things and they're beautiful, they're attractive, and we can enjoy them, but without attachment. I think the key is what she said, that there's no sense of craving. Because one obvious sense that, the obvious problem with attachment, one clear way of recognizing something is attachment is that when you can't have it, you feel disappointed. You know, that's a clear sign that you have attachment. If you see something as attractive and you think, oh, that looks good, and then suddenly for some reason you can't have it, you're separated from it, but there's no sense of loss. There's no sense of like, that's a problem. It's like, okay, that's fine. Then there's not really much attachment there. It's just kind of enjoying. So I think, because you can see that it doesn't disturb you.
There is enjoyment,
And
there is appreciation,
Yeah,
but there's no attachment.
there can be, yeah, there can be. I mean, we're so habituated to attachment, most instances of enjoyment, there's some degree of, I mean, because attachment can be very obvious and very subtle. So for us, almost every experience of enjoyment, there's some degree of attachment that comes. Wait, this gentleman in the back's been raising his hand.
Sorry.
Yes.
So probably the problem with attachment arises from the temporality of things, the sense of loss that a person perceives at the loss of that thing that you're attracted to is what causes the problem with attachment.
That's right. The sense of loss that you perceive, because you feel, because there's a sense that like, for me to be fulfilled, I need something externally. I need something from outside myself. It's like there is,
Deprivation.
yeah, there's a sense of like, I don't have a source of well-being or just happiness in myself that is just enough. You know? But there's a sort of discontentment, right? Attachment in part arises from a sort of neediness, right? But also there is a temporary aspect that all the things that we do enjoy, they are impermanent and they changing moment by moment. They're disappearing, and we tend to grasp at things when we see something as attractive as wanting it to remain. I mean, that's another aspect of attachment. When we see something as attractive and it's pleasing, we want that to stay, and we kind of have this unrealistic expectation that that's the way it should be. Yeah, you want it to go on and on and on. Yeah, and we kind of again and again have this unrealistic expectation that pleasant, situations somehow they should remain, and when they don't, that's like unfair. But actually, I mean, that's why one of the Buddha's fundamental teachings is all compounded phenomena are impermanent. Like everything we experience, especially all the pleasant experiences, but I mean, it's very helpful to think about unpleasant experiences, that they all arises from causes and conditions. Therefore, they don't remain even for the shortest moment. They're continually changing. So that's one big antidote for attachment, is thinking about impermanence. When we see the beautiful flowers at, the place, or we, fall in love with a person, to recognize this has arisen from cause and conditions, enjoy it while it lasts, because it won't be long, and it's going to go away. If we already have that mindset, like this won't last long, then when it disappears, it's much easier to accept.
Unfortunately, we don't think that it won't last long when the experience is not pleasant. Right.
That's why we have to meditate on impermanence again and again, recognize, and then I mean, when we reflect on how things are impermanent, changing moment by moment, then, and I mean, in terms of, small things like, seeing, just the sun comes out in the morning. It's a beautiful, warm morning. Like these days, the weather's really nice. The sun comes up, clears away the darkness, clears away the fog, if there's fog, or the coldness. And it's just, nice, warm, sunny morning. Something as small as that to something as big as like our whole life, When we recognize, I mean, the biggest instance of impermanence is death, right? That eventually this life ends. All these relationships with everyone we knew, this connection with our body, this connection with all our possessions, everything we enjoy, all of that, comes to an end, at death. So in either case, in a small case of, something enjoyable to the whole thing of our whole life, when we recognize that all of that has arisen from cause and conditions, it only lasts for a finite time, and then it will change and it'll become just like, yesterday's lunch, like just a memory, like nothing more than just a memory. We had a very nice lunch yesterday, Kabir and I, and now it's just a memory.
It's become something else.
That's right, yeah. But that will just become a memory too, thank God. Like, yeah.
Geshe, sorry, we also had a couple questions on Zoom whenever we can take those.
Okay, yes.
So are we also going to examine why do we experience that?
Why? Then that wasn't really in the lesson plan, but yeah, we can talk about why we experience attachment. Yeah, I'll come back. I mean, one is just habituation, but why do we have that habituation? I don't know. It's been there from the beginning of this time.
I want to talk about my personal.
Well, yeah, duality, but why do we have duality? You keep asking, yeah, beginningless ignorance. Why do we have beginningless ignorance? Why weren't we? Yeah, that's where you end up. See, that's where you end up. Like there's no, yes?
So I just wanted to sort of share, my own personal source of attachment.
Sure,
One is
you
in
can.
my area, my occupation, I'm a writer.
Mhm.
So my attachment comes from what my readers think about what I have written,
Mhm.
and I obsess over it.
Mm. Well, I guess you're attached to them thinking something good about what you've written, right? I mean, and then averse to them thinking something bad about what you've written. So it's more like concern. You're concerned about, yeah, and yeah, we're attached to praise. I mean, that's one of our fundamental attachments, is to approval by others. That's a big one. I mean, a very subtle one, being attached to approval, because we have since we're like infants, we want approval from our parents. We want affection from our parents. It's related back to that. But why do we have that? Well, yeah, definitely in some degree, why do we have attachment? Because it kind of is part of, it's probably worked into our biology to some degree, our evolution, that this affection between, a parent and child is a source of our sustenance, our survival. And so that way, and that's very deep, kind of, so partly definitely that. But then the Buddhism is always looking at, the past lives, and so the mental habituation there. But I didn't finish this point I was trying to make earlier. I don't think I made it clear. Was that, oh yeah, when we recognize, the pleasant experiences we have, when we recognize that they've arisen from causes and conditions and that they're impermanent, meaning they're momentarily disintegrating, right? It's the definition of impermanence, that which is momentarily disintegrating. So each moment they're passing away, they're only coming closer to their demise. Then it kind of frees us from this false expectation that that's going to last, and puts us more in the moment and helps us just enjoy it while it lasts, and fully enjoy it now, and recognize what a miraculous thing that this has arisen, that what a miraculous thing that this, this human life and this, experience, this sunny morning has arisen, and it's here now. I better just enjoy it now, because the past is already gone, the future hasn't come. Just experience in the moment with the expectation that it's going to pass away. It's like it makes it all the more rich, It's kind of like life doesn't really have profound meaning unless you actually think about death. When you think about death, you're going to be separated from all your siblings, all your friends, all your parents, and everything, then it makes it, much more kind of powerful to be able to enjoy it now, appreciate while you can, seize the day, sort of thing. Okay.
A couple of things. One, on the online questions,
Yeah.
we need a 2-minute break for a break, and also to make an announcement.
Okay.
Maybe soon after.
Okay, I'll take a couple. Okay, so there's some people, hands up.
Yeah,
online.
Vinsu, you can go ahead. If you're there. Yeah.
Hi. So as you described attachment, I was kind of analyzing when you said close your eyes and try to relate to whatever you're saying, and I could. But when you said does it appear like it's going to give pleasure from its own side, like it's really attractive from its own side? And I thought about it, and I couldn't really contradict this fact, because it does appear like that it is going to, the object itself from its own side is that does give that impression. And also when you said that imagine and analyze, if I leave this, if I don't have this, I feel discontented. And I think I did, I do feel that if I don't have it, I do feel discontented. So how do I contradict, or maybe really think about?
Come back after the break.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, you've in that way, you've correctly seen some of the two of the most important characteristics of attachment. That's exactly right. You do feel discontented if you can't have it, and it does feel like it's attractive from its own side. So if you see that, you accurately are seeing, yes, that's what attachment is. Then a little later, I'll talk about how can we see that those are two different false perceptions. That the pleasure, I mean, to answer in short though, if the object really is attractive or pleasant from its own side, in the way we perceive it, then everybody should find that object as similarly as attractive and pleasant in the way we do, right? So we have to ask, is that the case? That the thing that I see as pleasant and attractive and I'm attached to, does everybody else see that as something attractive and pleasant or not? With some, it's quite easy, like garlic, hummus with a lot of garlic. Yeah, obviously some people don't like a lot of garlic. Usually with other people we're attracted to, some other, there's always someone who doesn't like the person and they don't see them as, attractive whatsoever. With things like praise from others, it's a little more difficult. And approval from our ego, being attached to good reputation, because everybody likes to be praised. Everybody likes good reputation. So those are a little more difficult.
So is it also coming from what my design is like, that I perceive certain things or people or places or objects as, according to my own karmic connection, maybe, or my own design that I, so
yes.
then,
Very
right.
Just even in regard to this gentleman's question about like, how do you discern how much you're exaggerating the pleasantness of something? It's almost impossible it's impossible to do because a place that's helpful to think about this, you'll know, maybe the others won't know, but in the Lam Rim, there's this whole presentation of the Buddha's teachings in the Lam Rim, the graduated stages of the path, where attachment is presented in relation to the second of the Four Noble Truths, right? There's the truth of suffering and the truth of the causes of suffering. So the truth of the causes of suffering is all about the afflictive emotions, one of them being attachment. But another place attachment comes up is in the course of the 12 links of dependent arising. So in the 12 links of dependent arising, I think it's the 9th and 10th link, the links of craving and grasping are both forms of attachment. And the links that precede that are contact and feeling, right? So just contact, so first we just contact an object, with our mind we contact an object. And then in dependence upon our mind coming into contact or, experiencing an object, we generate a feeling of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or neutrality. That feeling is a result of our karma. So just as you were saying, whatever feeling we have with regard to an object, and the way it appears, we contact an object, and then we have a pleasant feeling, and the object appears as attractive, that's totally a creation of our karma. It doesn't exist from its own side whatsoever, right? So, and that's why different people, perceive different objects in different ways because of their karma, right? So then, to what degree do we exaggerate? I think that the main way we exaggerate is kind of what I pointed out, is we exaggerate in feeling like, well, one, that attractiveness is not a product of my karma, it's from the side of the object. That's an exaggeration. And two, that object is only attractive and there's nothing unattractive about the object. That's also an exaggeration, right?
So how do we, process this fact that, okay, if it is my own, design that something appears to me like that, then how do I need to break it down to process in a way that, okay, I can still be okay if I don't have this?
I think we need a 2-minute break, no?
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm going to talk about later. That's in the lesson. But before we break, we'll do this other gentleman's question and then we'll stop.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, Anushri.
Not the other gentleman, the other person who has their hand up. I can't see your name.
Anushri. Go ahead.
Hello, Geshe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one is that, attachment, what we did right now, that when you introspect the specific desire which comes repeatedly in your mind is the place or the person or the thing you're attached to, the desire which comes repeatedly in your head when you're sitting idle. And the second is like, why are we attached? Why does attachment arise in the first place? So can we say that all of us, we have this innate desire to be happy? And when we believe that, this object or this person is going to make me happy, that is where our mind automatically goes. We have different belief systems and we think like different things, and different, like travel will make me happy, or being with this person will make me happy, or wearing good clothes will make me happy. So that's how we become attached. So can we say that? And what about like So is it possible, what if you're attached to the concept of, like, to concepts of liberation, for instance, that you've realized that, in no corner of this world, the kind of happiness which I'm looking for, will I get that kind of like permanent happiness, like all these clothes, travel, and people, relationships, they give you happiness. But again, one of the reasons why attachment is so difficult to get rid of is because of our inability to see into the future. Like, we don't know how will this person turn out to be from 10 years down the line, or, like impermanence, right? We forget the impermanence of things, of situations.
Yes,
So is it right, that attachment arises from?
right.
Can we say?
That's right.
And
we can say
what
all
about,
that.
and what about like this? Can we become attached to the concept of liberation?
Yes. Yeah, we can become attached to, the concept of liberation. Yeah. I mean, definitely we become, like, I know when I was, even now probably I'm attached, but especially when I was a new Buddhist, I was very attached to Buddhism and being Buddhist. And, usually if someone says something derogatory about Buddhism, then you can see you get a little angry, upset. That shows attachment. Any instance of irritation, anger, not liking, that comes from attachment. Anger always arises from attachment. So yeah, we can we can be attached to our gurus. We can be attached to, the idea of enlightenment. I want to become enlightened, such that, we become obsessed. It's always a little bit obsessive attachment. A very obvious case, the more obsessive, but the idea of liberation from samsara, yeah, we can be attached to that. Yeah, definitely. So, and the main ways to, to check, we have to check again and again the way we relate to things that we're attracted to, that we aspire to, even the way we relate to our religion, the way we relate to our own beliefs, the way we relate to our guru. Is it attachment by, well, okay, am I exaggerating, the positive qualities? That's a little difficult to do with like our gurus, because we should only see positive qualities, right? So that's a very difficult one. But definitely some people see as unattractive, right? As a result of their karma. But do I have difficulty pulling my attention away? In a way, like, we're always supposed to think about the refuge. Once we take refuge, you should always have awareness of the Buddha. So how does it, I haven't thought about that one that much, but how does it make sense to pull away? But if we see anger arising, definitely that's a mistake, no? If we see other people criticizing, our aspiration to become liberated from samsara, our aspiration to become enlightened, and then we get angry about that, definitely that's mistaken. That's causing more disturbance. It helps also to come back to, is the way I relate to, my religion, the way I relate to my gurus, the way I relate to my aspiration for liberation, is it bringing more peace and clarity in the mind? Or is it bringing more agitation and disturbance in the mind? That's very helpful to check that way. Anyway, let's take a break now and we can talk more a little later, okay? What do we do during the break?
So 5 minutes, 6, 7 minutes?
5 minutes.
5-minute break. I need to ask people who, since there's an afternoon session, who wants lunch here? We can order lunch. Put your hands up very straight if you want lunch. Okay. Afternoon session is 2:30. And then we would, of course, also request a donation for lunch. So there's always people who donate and sponsor a little, but if you can make some donation anyway for Tushita, that would be really excellent, since it's the Dharma Center, depending on people. Okay, so we have about 8-9 people for lunch. You have another 3-4 minutes for the break if you need to do something.
It's a break.
There's a big Tibetan refugee.
Galton led in the teach week.
Oh, you've been there? Yeah. Oh, you were there? Nice. Yeah. Yeah, he lives nearby me. We live in the same monastery.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If we think about the other extreme, if we detach
very deeply. If we think that attachments are the root cause of all suffering, and we question our existence, and how to get back into the thinking that, live in present moment, or start at least appreciating rather than being in the depressive cycle.
Yeah. Well, if you see that this sort of you're practicing detachment such that it causes you to be unhappy, then you can see that's another afflictive emotion because it's disturbing the peace of your mind. So I think when we see things and experience things as pleasant and enjoyable, we should recognize that's a result of our virtuous karma. It's because we've created virtuous karma in the past that we have those enjoyable experiences. So we're entitled to enjoy those, but we have to enjoy in such a way that we don't cling on to them and expect them to last on the one hand, and expect them to fundamentally satisfy us on the other hand. We have to look for, because we do want, the whole purpose of Buddhist teachings is to bring us happiness, to make us happy, not to make us like lonely and depressed, right? So we feel like if we see that the way we're thinking about relating to detachment is making us lonely and depressed, then we should recognize that's a problem and try to see, well, how can I be happy and enjoy things that, I like and enjoy, but also not fall into the trap of having this unrealistic expectation that those things from their side will bring me satisfaction, ultimate satisfaction. It's a kind of, it's not easy to do. It's a kind of a finding the middle way, really. It's a really kind of finding the middle way between detachment and attachment. It's kind of actually detachment is not a bad thing. But it's like correctly identifying what is a wholesome form of detachment versus like a kind of, self-maligning, like, nihilism, or what would you call it? What do you, self-denial, a kind of harmful self-denial. That's
what time do you want to have lunch?
I think 12:30.
Yeah, that early.
Oh,
that means another half hour.
Should we say 1?
That's not too late.
12:40. Okay, 12:30 is too late. 1 is
12:45.
too early. 12:45 will be perfect. That's the middle way. We always go for the middle way.
Do you want some hot water?
No, it's okay. That's enough. Thank you.
So Geshe, please start without me because it'll take a little while.
Okay, sure, yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's start again. Everyone here? I'll ring the bell. Just in case. Okay, so let's discuss some of the faults of attachment, and then we'll meditate again and see if those bear out to be, kind of relevant or accurate in terms of our own experience. And I mean, and maybe I can say, well, first of all, one of the different antidotes to attachment, one of the strongest is just recognizing the faults of attachment itself. So just seeing how attachment is problematic itself strengthens our resolve to try to practice the opposite of attachment, which is having few desires and being content, just having contentment, being content without the things we're attached to. So yeah, so maybe first a good place when we're looking at the faults of attachment. I mean, one way to start is just look at some analogies, some colorful analogies from different scriptures. So Pabonka Rinpoche in Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand is especially good with colorful analogies in general. But one of the analogies for attachment is like honey on the edge of a razor. So if you imagine a drop of honey on the edge of a razor, you go to lick it, and what happens? You get cut. You cut your tongue. So attachment generally, it's got that pleasant. It's a pleasant experience at first, but it leads into disappointment. And something that you didn't expect, an unpleasant experience that you didn't expect to have. So that's one way we can look. Check again. We have to check with our own experience. Is it the case the thing I'm attached to, that it is pleasant especially if I get the object of my attachment, if I get to experience it first, that it's pleasant, but then that pleasurable experience doesn't last and it leads into an unpleasant experience. Now, very different situations might be different. Like some don't obviously lead into, unpleasant experience, but some do, right? So we have to check. Another colorful analogy is like a moth being drawn to a flame. Like the moth sees the flame is very attractive and is drawn to it. And I don't know, maybe as it's getting near to it, maybe it feels the warmth and feels pleasant or something. I don't know, but then it ends up in the flame and gets burned. So attachment, maybe that's a better analogy for because in one way, attachment is, well, in the Vaibhāṣika school, or the Great Exposition School, attachment is considered the root cause of samsara. So even in the presentation of the 12 links of dependent arising, attachment is like the main force that throws us into rebirth. Of course, more subtle than attachment is ignorance, selfishness, and then ignorance grasping at an inherently existent self. But attachment is kind of like, as we're passing away from this life, what's the main force causing us to take rebirth again is not wanting to be separated from all the things we enjoy, not wanting to be separated from our body, not wanting to be separated from our name and our identity, our reputation, not wanting to be separated from our loved ones, our children, or our spouse, not wanting to be separated from our possessions. So having that kind of craving and grasping at all the things we've enjoyed, it's that force that causes the throwing karma to take rebirth again, to ripen. It's described as if we have in our continuum all these seeds of karma through the different actions we've done in this life and past life. We've created causes for taking certain kinds of rebirth, and those are like seeds. But the seed, for it to ripen and produce a sprout and grow, what does it need? It needs moisture and the nutrients from the ground, but especially moisture. It needs to be moistened and softened, and then it sprouts. So attachment is like the moisture that ripens the seeds to be thrown to a future life. So in that way, attachment is like a fundamental cause of our taking rebirth, right? And then once we take rebirth, what happens? Yes, there's a lot of pleasant things, but also inevitably there's aging, sickness, and then death. and separation from all that again, which is, a very obvious form of suffering. So, okay, so another analogy is like a moth being drawn to a flame. Another analogy, this is a very, very colorful analogy of Bon Rinpoche's. He said it's like a cannibal cheating. So he has this analogy. Actually, I mean, he's speaking to a male audience, so he says like a female cannibal cheating. But if you're speaking to a female audience, it'd be like a male cannibal cheating. You just switch it away. But in short, it's like this, imagine you're a sailor on the sea looking for the island full of wish-fulfilling jewels. And then you see these very attractive people, they're women or men, they're saying, oh, come here, we'll give you food, we'll give you water, a place to stay, dance and, have a good time with us. And then you go there, but then at night they come and attack you and eat you. So attachment is kind of like that. It looks very attractive, you enjoy, but then it can lead into like serious problems. I mean, think about adultery. It was totally like that, you're in a committed relationship with someone, but then attracted to someone else, and then think, oh, maybe this one time was okay, go on a date, then becomes a whole affair, and then you end up divorcing, have to divide all your property, your children are miserable, and your relatives all think you're like really lame, right? So I mean, it's like that, So again, we look at the obvious very bad example, very destructive examples, and then look at the more subtle kind of ways. Also drug addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction, they're forms of attachment, which obviously lead into a lot of problems. Also being obsessive compulsive behavior, or being overly concerned about what other people say about us, especially when we're teenagers. We all experience that at some point, where especially with social media these days, you're worried about what are other people saying about me. At some point, we have to realize like, it doesn't matter. They say what they want. No matter what I do, some people are going to approve and some people are going to disprove. That's their trip. I have to do what I think is right and be content with that. So, yeah. So, so attachment, so some of the problems with attachment, these analogies, like honey on the edge of a razor, the moth flying into a flame, cannibals cheating us. But so look at the more just characteristics then. The problems with attachment are, it causes us to have unrealistic expectations, right? We have an unrealistic expectation that the object of attachment, again, we can see this very, very clearly with in the case of a person. This is what most pop songs are about this, I love you, if you'll be with me, I'll be happy. If not, how can I go on, right? So we have,
Not the good rock song.
Not the good rock songs, no. If you listen to Pink Floyd or something, it's way beyond that, right? But yeah, the pop songs, no. Even the Beatles started out that way. Yeah. Then they took, anyway. So we have its unrealistic expectation with that the object of our attachment, if it's a person, it's food, it's reputation, it's approval from other people, that's going to satisfy us. In stories about, sometimes you see different stories about people who, deeply practice Buddhism or went into psychology or something. Sometimes people have a major reevaluation in their life when they've been striving for some very high, difficult to acquire goal. This Tao, there's this Jewish guy who's very famous in positive psychology. He's a professor at Harvard. He has some very good videos on YouTube. I don't remember, Tao something. But he talks about, as an example, like when he was a young person, a teenager, he played, I think, badminton or ping pong or something. Anyway, this game, and he wanted to be the best, in the whole world. So he became, best in he's from Israel, right? So he became best in his region. Then he went to, national competition, then won in the whole nation. He won the award for being, the best badminton player or whatever. And he thought, oh, God, now this goal I've been striving to achieve, I finally achieved it. Now I'll be happy. And then, he wasn't happy. And then it causes kind of reevaluation about, well, what is it? How do I achieve happiness? If it's this, have this very high, difficult to achieve goal, and one's practicing and, training day and night to achieve that. And then finally you achieve that. And then you wake up the next morning and his life is kind of just the same. Then can cause a reevaluation, like what really brings satisfaction. So one aspect of one fault of attachment is it gives us the false idea that the object of our attachment will fundamentally satisfy us, and leads us to have this kind of unrealistic expectation of, the person or wealth or reputation or whatever. And then we're disappointed, right? Again and again and again. And then another fault of attachment is it sets us up to be frustrated because things don't always go the way we want. More often than not, we don't get the object of our desire. Something interferes. I don't know, the person decides they don't like us, or the business situation changes and we lose our wealth, or something happens and people who approved of us and praise us, suddenly they're criticizing us. And then we get upset and angry because we didn't think that was going to happen. So anytime, we feel disappointed, not anytime we feel disappointed, but many times. And then almost any time we get angry, anger arises out of attachment. So we were attached to something happening in a certain way, and it doesn't happen that way, and then we get upset because our ego wasn't satisfied. Now, again, there might be some room. Yes, Tal Ben Shahar, someone wrote it there, Sujit, that Israeli guy. Tal Ben Shahar has some very good videos on happiness. Yeah, so attachment gives rise to anger. Attachment can also lead us to justify unethical behavior, because here's another thing. Attachment is fundamentally a selfish attitude. This one I forgot to mention earlier. This one we need to check. It's fundamentally self-concern, self-centered, arises out of selfish concern. So this one especially you can see with regard to other people when we're attached to a person. With regard in like a romantic relationship, it's very clear. In a relationship like a parent for their children, parents, we are attached to our children, or children attached to their parents or siblings, then maybe it's a not so clear, because it appears like our attachment for the child is really for the child's benefit. But then you see when the child does something we think is not in their best interest, but they clearly feel they are, and we get angry about it, then the attachment part becomes more clear. But that we have to, but attachment fundamentally arises from a selfish concern. And when we follow attachment, it reinforces that selfish concern and thereby our lack of concern for others. So let's check again in our own experience. Let's meditate a little bit again. We'll go back to your example of attachment. So here, when you meditate on attachment or anger, when we recall, and when we recall our own instance of attachment, it helps not just to look at it as something like a memory in the distant past, but to try to relive that experience, right? Try to give rise to that kind of attachment again, and then with a corner of your mind to look at it. But be careful that you don't use something that's so attractive and that it kind of overwhelms your mind such that you can't think about it in an objective way, right? So focus your mind inwards and try to remember an instance of attachment, and try to vividly give rise to that sort of experience of being attracted to that, the object of your attachment again. So briefly remember some of the analogies. Another one I forgot to mention was like athlete's foot, like scratching a itch that comes from that kind of athlete's foot. It feels good at first, but then it leads, the itch gets worse and gets stronger. So in your experience, is your attachment like this, that it leads to disappointment again and again? Is that there or not? And then similarly, but slightly different, is there the false expectation that the object of my attachment can fundamentally satisfy me, can give me a sort of lasting satisfaction that quenches my desire for happiness? So is this unrealistic expectation that the object of attachment can make me happy and satisfy me? And then another question, does attachment and the way I relate to the object of attachment, does it make me more selfish? Yeah, more self-centered. And more kind of, what do you say, insensitive to the needs or the condition of others. So fundamentally, does my attachment make me more selfish? And then another question, well, does attachment give rise to my being irritable and angry? Right? So does my attachment set me up to be disappointed? And not only disappointed, but to be resentful when I don't get what I desire? And then last, kind of in a more subtle way, when I have attachment to an object, does it disturb my mind? Is there a sense of like craving for the object, longing for the object, such that I don't have the peace of contentment? So does it kind of disturb the mind such that I don't have the peaceful mind of just contentment with what is already there? Okay, so we can stop there. So,
Trungpa says something very interesting and I quite liked about
Trump?
getting attached to the breath. Trungpa Rinpoche.
Trump Rinpoche, okay.
He says,
I thought you said Trump.
I'm sure, yeah. That would
Okay.
be harder.
So Chogyam Trungpa, yes.
So
Chogyam
he says
Trungpa.
with the breath, he used to give the students the instructions, you touch the breath, touch and let go, touch and go, touch and go, which is interesting. You just touch the breath and then you're going to let go. You don't, because some people really, get into the breath.
Oh, right.
With breath away. So
Okay.
that I found useful. Touch and go.
Right.
Touch. That's it.
Like,
Don't.
as a practice of just
Don't-
letting go of things.
Yeah, and he
In general.
emphasizes out breath and letting go with the out breath.
I see. Okay.
Which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, maybe that's a good, helpful technique. I mean, because we do I mean, as like a healthy way to experience pleasant things, that could help you kind of experience and let go. That is kind of maybe a good method. Anyway, I hope you all could you see in your experience how those kind of faults?
What about things that are beneficial for us? Say, suppose I get very used to taking a walk in the evening, and then I get upset if somebody else wants that time and I'm not able to do it.
Yeah, selfishness. No, I mean, it's true. There are things that are beneficial for us, like going for a walk in the evening. But yeah, that's when someone else needs your attention or whatever, or takes up your attention, and then the mind gets upset about it. Why can't you just be like, okay, that happened, and for whatever reason, whether I like to or not, I have to give their attention, and I can't go for a walk tonight. What causes the mind get upset? That kind of desire. The more you have desire to go for a walk, the more your mind will get upset. If there's a little bit of desire, the mind just get a little upset. If there's a lot of desire, you might be really pissed off at the person. If there's really no desire, I mean, if there's really kind of, a kind of healthy detachment from going for a walk, like if I can, it's good for me. I like it, and it's good exercise. It brings some space to my mind. It helps me be a more healthy person. But if I can't have it, then so be it. I have to accept. That happens sometimes. Yeah. But could you all see those? What are the things I was talking about? That it leads to irritation, anger. That one's a good example. That you have unrealistic expectation that the object will satisfy. That just the longing for the object disturbs the peace that we would have if we just had contentment, less desires. Okay, I think those are not so difficult to see. So since we don't have much time left, then we'll go towards antidotes and speak more about, okay, well, how do we actively, when we see we have a problem with attachment to something, what can we do to conscientiously try to reduce that?
Lunch is not coming till 1. I just got a message.
Okay.
So we do have some time. But
Okay.
of course, you may want.
Well, we don't have to go
to.
till 1. We started at 10:45. Okay. So antidotes. Well, like I said, the first antidote is just to look at all these faults of attachment, to see how, to see how attachment, causes my mind to be disturbed, how I have an unrealistic expectation that object of my attachment is never going to satisfy me. So that's I found one of the most powerful antidotes, look at, maybe we're attached to something now, like all the different things I mentioned, and look at all the instances in the past when we were attached and we expected that somehow that person's going to satisfy me, that, position, getting wealth, whatever, that food, that it's going to satisfy me, and how it never really does. It's pleasant for some time, but that never really lasts. And that, we shouldn't just jump to the conclusion it never satisfies. We can ask the objective question: have I ever really been satisfied by that object of my attachment in the past? And then, if we can see that no, it's kind of like again and again we're like suckers for attachment. We believe somehow that this time it's going to be different. This time it's going to last. This time it's it's going to be the true kind of satisfaction I've been hoping for. But then again and again something changes and it's not, and it goes away. And then like a meal of food, it's not a big deal. Okay, we don't have so much strong attachment. We can have attachment, but we don't have, because we know the meal's only going to last for a certain time, and then we're not going to have it for a time. And then eventually, we'll miss it. We'll want to have that food again, and then again we have it. Okay, but this is a powerful antidote to see how, the objects of our attachment, they never really give us like lasting satisfaction. That's one. And then another antidote is to see how the relationship to selfishness, because usually we can quite identify how we can easily see how selfishness is a problem. Like selfishness is not a way we want to be, and it leads into a lot of other problems. So if we can see how our attachment, it really does make me more self-centered at the cost of being aware of and being concerned about others. Because really, one of the deepest sources of authentic satisfaction, which we can increase infinitely, is caring about other people. If you look at the different kinds of joy we have in life, the different kinds of satisfaction, the different kinds of a sense of fulfillment, what we get from food is very insignificant. Music also, it can feel really, because music somehow has a strong connection with our emotions. It can feel incredible sometimes, but it doesn't last that long. But the satisfaction we get when other people do things that please us, it's really nice. But then the satisfaction we get when we can help other people, when we can, do things that we can see benefits other people, it's a much more deep and kind of pure satisfaction. And that we can increase. And that is what all the Buddhas are kind of fueled by, I think, enlightened beings, they devote their life to benefiting others. And that's what they do, like, continually. So you could imagine, the sort of joy that arises if you just continuously, spontaneously are, using all of the energies you have to work for the welfare of others. Like, it's kind of unimaginable, I think. So that kind of, when we follow objects of attachment that reinforce a selfish state of mind, it separates us from the possibility of having that real joy of selflessly caring about others, right? So that's another fault. So we look at how it's disappointing again and again, and that, we think it's going to give us, the object of attachment, we think it's going to give us pleasure, but it doesn't. And then how it reinforces selfishness, how it cuts us off from deeper, more like sustainable kind of joy and satisfaction. And then another antidote, which, yeah, you have to see a way for yourself to work with that's comfortable for you, but is to think about, then this is more to do with recognizing, remember, the way attachment engages with its object is it only sees positive qualities about the object, right? And thinks that those are really from the side of the object. So another is to think about how my perception of attractiveness is due to my own karma. If that was real, then everybody should see the object of my attachment in the same way, but they don't. But another is to think about the unattractive sides of the object of attachment. So like with food, it's an easy example. Say there's a certain food that you're really attached to, but it's not good for your health, as so often is the case, like chocolate or something. So think about all the ways it's really bad for your health. And then that helps to cut the attachment, right? If it's another person you're attached to and you only see positive things about them, yeah, it can be a little uncomfortable and a little problematic to think about all the negative sides of the person. But sometimes it's reality. So it's not that we're trying to see just the negative sides of things, but to have a more realistic picture of the object of attachment. So another way that helps is another easy situation to see how that's helpful to look at the negative sides of things is praise for us. When other people praise us, yes, it feels good, it's nice, but look at how that's not so good. Oftentimes they praise us in a way that's not even real, because they just want, like someone's trying to sell you a car, they're going to tell you, you look great and you're a very impressive person and because they want you to like them, right? So salespeople do that all the time. So sometimes people praise us in a way that is deceiving, to us. Sometimes people praise us in a way that's not, also not sincere. Sometimes even people praise us in a way that's sincere. It puffs up our ego. It gives us an inflated sense of self, such that when someone else criticizes us, then we feel like we drop way down. So in that way, we have to be careful. We have to be suspect of praise. One, because it might not be sincere, and one, because it might lead us to have an inflated opinion of ourselves that's also realistic. So that's like a way of looking at the negative side of the object of attachment, and that can help reduce. And then also impermanence. Just thinking about impermanence, that this situation, even if it's pleasant, there's nothing very destructive about it, it's not going to last forever. Just that's a great way to cut through attachment. It's kind of like putting lemon in oil. It cuts through it quite well. So that's why the Buddha, in relation to the first noble truth, right? There's 4 characteristics of the truth of suffering. Sorry, of the 4 noble truths, the first is the truth of suffering. The 4 characteristics of the truth of suffering are suffering, impermanence, what is it? I have to say in Tibetan, dungel, mita, dungel, dongwa datme, emptiness and selflessness, right? So first is mita, impermanence, then suffering. Oh yeah. So those first 2, the other 2, the last 2 we won't get to today, but the first 2 are very effective antidotes. So think about impermanence, what I enjoy, what I'm attracted to, even if I can enjoy it, that enjoyment won't last because it's impermanent, it's changing and passing away. And then the second, that everything we experience through the force of our karma, contaminated karma, which has arisen through the force of ignorance. And so it's all in the nature of suffering, in short. So ultimately, we won't bring all ultimate satisfaction because it's arisen from the fundamental misconception about how things actually exist. So the objects of our attachment are all in the nature of suffering. Most of the pleasant experiences we have, they're actually the suffering of change. That one, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more, it requires a bit more background understanding for it to be effective, but the impermanence is very easy to apply. So the ones I mentioned, impermanence leads to disappointment, increases selfishness, gives rise to anger. And then another one I didn't mention, which is kind of a fault, is attachment leads. Oh, sorry. And then the other antidote is thinking about the negative aspects, the unpleasant aspects of the object of attachment. But then another one is how attachment to objects, it's like implicitly sends the message to us that we don't have a source of well-being and joy and fulfillment just within ourselves, right? That we ourselves are not, that we're something useless in a way. We're something that's bereft of an inner source of well-being and contentment and fulfillment, which is, it's kind of it's a message of low self-esteem, right? It leads to low having a low opinion of oneself. So when we have this expectation that to be happy, to be fulfilled, I need this from someone else or for something else, from then it's implicitly sending a message that we are something low and kind of, or bad, or bereft of an inner source of joy and satisfaction. So let's, I don't know, any questions about those kind of antidotes? Then we'll practice applying.
Just wondering about the Theravada one, where they, the cemetery meditations.
Yeah, ugliness. Yeah, I was saying the negative aspect of the object is the ugliness of the body. So it's a bit strong. Yeah. I mean, there is one, if you're attached to another person's, because honestly, one of the strongest forms of attachment we ever have is the sexual desire, desire for another person's body. Or and maybe even stronger than that is for emotional closeness with another person. But the two become very, mixed. That's what romance is all about. Not only physical, emotional closeness, but the expressing that through a kind of physical closeness and contact and very intimacy. That's one of the strongest forms of attachment we have. Probably because that's what propagates, generation after generation of human being. That's what ensures the survival of our race. So biologically, that's hardwired into us. So, one antidote for attachment to another person's body is to think about all the unpleasant aspects of their body. But, if you want to have children, that could ruin it for you, or something like that, like you have to be careful how you apply that, if that's something you really want to apply or not. That's taught, from monastics, of course, if you're a celibate person, that's great. That helps a lot to cut that attachment. But the general principle is what I was talking about. You think about some of the undesirable aspects of the object of your attachment, and that can help cut it. Okay. Any other? Please, yeah. Yes.
We have generally attachment towards our relatives, towards the dearer ones are beloved, right?
Yes.
We always want to their good wishes, always convey their good wishes. If they commit something bad or upset, then we are anxious. That anxiety comes in the natural. So what should be in that case the antidote of this kind of attachment towards relatives and dear ones?
Yeah, I think, we have to distinguish between having a wholesome sort of affection and caring about our relatives and dear ones, which is okay. That's good to have affection for them and care about them. But it really helps here to see how attachment arises from a selfish concern. That I care about them and therefore they should do this or they should do this. When we see that, then we realize it's becoming an ego trip. Our ego is so tricky, it's always slipping in there. So when we care about others and they suffer and we feel a degree of that, that's just empathy. That's not a problem. But when it leads to this kind of expectation that comes from our ego, that because I care about them, then they should act like this. They should treat me like this. They should, make this kind of choice. And if they don't, then somehow I can't I can't care about them, or I can't approve of them, or I can't support them any longer. Then we see that there's attachment there. Of course, that doesn't mean no matter what other people do, we should support them in that, because there are wise decisions and there are foolish decisions. But we need to check again and again, is my caring about them, is it truly caring about them, irregardless of my kind of value judgments and my expectations about what I think is best for them? No. Do I really care about their welfare? I don't know. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Another question. Is it possible for one birth to get rid of attachment?
Well, eventually we'll get rid of attachment, and there will be that last birth when we do get rid of attachment. So it depends, like what's your starting point, in one birth, like as a dog, we won't get rid of attachment in that life. But in this life as a human being, maybe it's possible. It depends upon what kind of causes and conditions we've created in past lives and how diligently we practice in this life also. So yes, I mean, because the mind is by nature clear and knowing, attachment is not inherently part of our mind. So it's not inherently part of our being. So it's possible for, just like pollution in water, it's possible to be separated. But like, what kind of filters are we applying? You know, do we have a very powerful reverse osmosis filter this life that we can totally separate out the pollutants? Or are we just kind of dripping through, you know, slowly dripping through, what do you say, that kind of clay, the ceramic sort of filter that is not really going to get everything out? Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, we have to check that also. Check, is it possible to eliminate attachment from my mind or not?
Kirti Sensor Rinpoche was once asked by somebody, when can I get married without any fear of attachment?
Yeah.
You'll have to wait till you're 8 Boogie Bodhisattva.
Yeah, perfect answer. Yeah, because at that time you don't have afflictive emotions arise anymore.
So, you know, he said, so it's okay, you know, get married, but you won't be free of attachment.
Yes.
You said sexual attraction as the one of the strongest attachments. But don't you think life itself is one of the strongest attachments that human beings have, the permanence of impermanence?
True, yeah. Just life, being attached to being alive versus being dead. Yeah, definitely. Because we know that because one of the strongest fears is of death, right? So yeah, definitely. That's probably stronger and more fundamental. But that one doesn't arise as, in the course of our life, that one probably doesn't arise as.
When it does arise, it's very strong.
When it does arise, it's incredibly strong. Yeah. Totally overwhelming, really. If you're driving in a car and then suddenly you get an accident, or you're in the ocean and being carried away by like a rip current, then yeah, in that moment, it leads you to panic very quickly. That's why it's so important to prepare for the moment of death. Because at the moment when, all of us are going to die eventually. We'll be fortunate if we can die kind of with mindfulness, sort of slowly enough, and with enough strength and health that we can be mindful of the process, and then be accepting, right? Accept what's going on. Because if we don't accept, that can be, that's attachment.
That's a great struggle.
Yeah, that's a great struggle, and it's very difficult. That's why it's important to recognize that death is going to come and to prepare for it, and to imagine that process happening and kind of role play, like imagine dying with acceptance, right? That's one big sort of field of meditation in Buddhism, is imagining the death process and sort of being okay with that, and imagining what sort of virtuous attitude do you want to generate in place of attachment to living, to go through that process.
Another thing that I've asked is that negation of attachment to a great degree, does it prevent a human being from having experience? Or does it kind of put a fear of experiencing something because of the impermanence of that experience of thing, prevent a human being from
Could you make the question for the online?
Sure, yeah. So for the online people, and correct me if I don't get it right, but does the recognition of like the faults of attachment create a fear of experiencing pleasure, pleasant things?
Not just pleasure, any experience.
Or any experience. Yes, it can. It can, but that would kind of like be going too far. So because a fear again disturbs the peace of the mind. Now there are wholesome fears and there's unwholesome fear, but like I was saying, there was a gentleman asking a good question in the break about which I think relates to your question about what about if you practice detachment such that you feel like you shouldn't enjoy anything, and you feel lonely and depressed, right? But then, yeah, that's possible. And that means like your detachment is kind of going too far. So a healthy way to relate to pleasures is to recognize when I have a pleasant experience, that's a result of virtuous karma that I've created in the past, right? So any pleasant experience that we have, whether, from the taste of eating food or hearing pleasant sounds or having a nice thought arise or having a good connection with another person that, we enjoy, all that is the result of virtuous karma that we've created in the past. Now, yes, there is a danger that will lead to attachment. So we want to be aware of that danger, but that's where we apply it's good to remember impermanence. It's good to remember, that the suffering nature of karma, and all the faults of attachment, the danger of selfishness. But, if we can kind of have, we need to find a middle way where we don't practice a sort of harsh self-denial on the one hand, but we don't practice a sort of blind indulgence on the other hand, where we can enjoy things in the moment with awareness of reality. And there's all different aspects of reality.
Very, very good balance.
Yeah, there's finding this middle way, this balance, where we understand reality. The deeper level of reality I haven't really touched on, but just this middle level of reality, that of karma. Pleasant things arise due to my karma and impermanence. And these things are arising from causes and conditions, pleasant or unpleasant. Unpleasant circumstances also, it helps to think about impermanence, because we realize this won't last. Now, eventually it's going to go away and there'll be, the sun will come out again. Yeah.
It's like, it seems like, if you take the analogy of an athlete, they may have aspirations to run very fast, but if they don't train, it's not going to happen. So I'm thinking that without a background of some kind of meditation, sitting practice, and calming the mind, without that as a background, all of this becomes very difficult.
All of this finding the middle way to enjoy things.
The middle way is very difficult if one doesn't have a mind that is used to being calm and slowing down and so forth.
Probably, yeah.
Unless you have very powerful karmic instincts to be,
detached. Yeah. Yeah, reducing attachment is not easy. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, it helps to have a meditative practice. Even with a meditation practice, it's not easy. So yeah, it's not easy. Attachment, like I said, it's like separating oil from cloth. No, it's very difficult to do. So, but yeah, to have a meditation practice where you remember impermanence, you practice mindfulness, recognize how things arise and pass away. You reflect on the faults of attachment again, how attachment's related to selfishness, how attachment doesn't really bring satisfaction. Yeah, all those things are necessary.
Coming back to JG's question of yesterday about what is happiness, which is it, what you said about caring for others, I think that could be a way. If you constantly care for others, you're constantly free of fear and insecurity.
Yeah, those are the two. That's the one, I think, that because there is, this comes up in the discussion of also the suffering of change. Because usually, that's often we say, talking about, because suffering of change are pleasant sensations that don't last, right? And actually, especially actions that bring a pleasure, but if those actions that bring pleasure, if they're in the nature of bringing pleasure, of enjoyment, then the more you do them, the more enjoyment you should get, right? But rather it's the case. So most of the, actions we do or objects we engage with, which bring pleasure, if we keep engaging with that object or keep doing it, that transforms into an unpleasant experience, right? So, but then there's the question, well, is there anything we can do that the more we do, the more pleasure it brings, right? So I think the two best candidates are caring about others, just fundamentally caring. Now, of course, there are a lot of things we do relate out of that might lead to difficulties, but just fundamentally being concerned about the welfare of others. So love, wishing others to have happiness, ourselves and others to have happiness and well-being, and compassion, wishing for ourselves and others to be free from suffering. Those attitudes, I think you can increase infinitely, and they just bring more and more pleasure.
But also
pleasure or happiness?
Both. Yeah. And then the second one, before I'll come to your comment, but before is wisdom, realizing the true nature of reality, realizing impermanence, the wisdom, deeply understanding impermanence, deeply understanding interdependence, deeply understanding selflessness. That wisdom itself also brings a kind of pleasure, I think. So yes.
Yeah, so I was saying that when you care a lot about too many people, often you're also disappointed and hurt because there is no reciprocity, or it could be anything, or they're not listening to you, or mainly reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Being attached to a result.
Yeah. See, exactly. That's where the caring about other people, it always gets mixed with attachment for us. So it becomes attached to reciprocity. I mean, that's like love with strings. We want to have,
So it has to be like, there has to be a very disciplined approach to caring for someone, which
that's
is
right. That's right. Where we're aware, we're cautious about our selfishness coming in there, and we care about them, love them, but realize it's impermanent. Realize, I shouldn't have unrealistic expectations. Realize they're going to do things I don't like. Realize just because I care about someone doesn't mean they're going to care about me. And let go of that. I have to let go of that.
For the pleasure of doing it, not because it gives you something.
Yeah. I have to have, what is it called? Selfless love, basically. Like pure love is selfless. No? We just want really what's best for the person, whatever that means, even if it means they don't want to be around me. That happens, and that's often the case, no? Yeah. Okay, yes. In what kind of situation? Imagine in the worst case scenario.
Many people are expecting the care, the treatment that we are giving in return.
Yeah.
Is imagining the worst case scenario and how we make it if it comes.
Oh, yeah, that can help reduce attachment. Yeah, but also, I mean, clearly, like with like being attached to sugary foods. No, if you have diabetes, you can imagine the worst case scenario that you lose your sight or have to get limbs amputated or stuff. Yeah, that can definitely help cut attachment.
I did an experiment like this one. So every day in the morning when I was driving to office, I would assume in my mind that I won't get parking. So then if I got parking, I would just be delighted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very clever.
I did this for about a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, that's clever. Yeah, and I mean, and I think that the objective, like with reducing attachment, is to learn to, well, the opposite of relating to things with attachment is to have few desires, right? So to recognize how the desires that we have that lead us to have unrealistic expectations and kind of disturb the peace of our mind, and just try to be more simple, have more simple lives, right? With less desires. And then be content, practice contentment, like with what we have. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we should just practice contentment like being in samsara, or practice contentment being enlightened, or practice contentment like being miserable. Like we do need to recognize, states where we can improve, where we can make our lives better. That's fine, but try not to have these unrealistic expectations from things that aren't really going to satisfy us. And just, be content with kind of what comes.
A very Tibetan word for Buddhist apparently means someone who's going inside more than outside. Is that right?
Yeah, Nangpa. Yeah, inner being. But it doesn't, I'm not sure it really has in Buddhism, in the Nangpa, it more means like one who's within refuge, like within those who take refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha. And those, as opposed to, because there's another term, outsiders, which means non-Buddhists. So outsiders doesn't mean in the, what is it, Chipa, yeah. It doesn't mean, it means like non-Buddhists. It doesn't mean those who look outside for happiness so much. There can be that kind of connotation there, but it's not.
To be a good Buddhist, you have to look inside.
No, you do. You do.
Good Buddhist.
Yeah.
Card carrying.
Yeah.
So lunch is here.
Oh, great. Let's stop then.
It'll take a few minutes to unpack and set it up.
Yeah, so we haven't had time to meditate on the antidotes, but I think I've described quite well, and I think you understand. So in your own time, just try to practice. Try to, use the antidotes. And this is, I mean, this kind of meditation on, so we talked about what is attachment, trying to clearly identify. And then what are the faults of attachment? So identify in terms of all the different characteristics. How does attachment, mainly how does it relate to the object in a distorted ways, in different distorted ways? And then all the different faults of attachment, and then some of the ways to apply antidotes. So this kind of meditation is, you don't have to be sitting on your cushion to do. Just when you're walking, when you're talking with other people, when you're at the office, whatever you're doing, you see attachment to things arise, you can, think about, is this attachment, why or why not? What are the kind of faults of this way of relating to it? How can I kind of reduce this distorted way of relating to objects of attachment? And you can habituate yourself to that way of thinking, just, whatever you're doing. Okay, thank you all for your attention. You've asked great questions, and yeah, we've gotten some understanding, I hope so. Let's enjoy lunch and then come back at 2:30. Yes.
Thank you for a very nice session. I didn't even want to finish.
Okay, oh, great. And it's already been so long.
I hope you're coming in the afternoon, Neera.
I was totally sleep deprived and I thought I should probably leave after lunch, but I'm staying and my parents are coming over.
Okay, great.
Probably enough food for everybody.
Yeah, maybe have some coffee after lunch.
Just a few people can help to set up, and then most of us can eat upstairs. If some can bring the food down. We'll just see what the space situation is. Thank you.
Do you want to eat in your room or with us? Yeah, just on your own.
Yeah. Go there, we'll